Well, folks, it's a hot one out here today, but I'm making the best of it. I'm going to fire up the sawmill in a minute. The shade overhead is one of those things on days like today you really appreciate. Just a minute ago, I put a Ripper 37 blade on, so this is a fresh one, brand new. We'll cut some red pine here today. As you know, I'm up against a time crunch here. I got to get these milled, at least get the bark off them, so that the boring insects don't get into them. Now that the warm weather's here, the clock is ticking. They will get into them before long. And so we'll try to salvage as much as we can from the destruction all around me. As you know, that ice storm put me in a tough spot, but we'll get down to work here in just a minute. Now, you'll also see me here today. Aside from using my sawmill, you'll see me using the Setworks. If you're not familiar with these, we'll just fire it up. The Setworks will give me the ability to see where the blade is cutting at any time. So it'll have a number there. It says 3 3/4 right now. That's the distance from the blade down to the saw bed. You'll see that number go up and down as I move the saw head up and down once things are started up. The Setworks will also allow me to pre-program dimensions. And so once I get my log up there, I can set it for whatever thickness I'm going for. And then instead of having to read down and do the math in my head using the scale, I can more or less just press enter. And with that dimension put into the Setworks, it'll drop down the saw head automatically. I still have full control down and back, but what the Setworks will do is it'll calculate where the next cut should be, also taking into account the thickness of the blade or the kerf. Now the Setworks you'll also see me using to bump up the blade. Once I get down to the end, I can hit the bump up button and that'll bump up the saw head, and that'll allow me then to drag it back without having any interference between the blade and the previous cut. So I can do bump up, I can do bump down, and enter as well. And you'll see all that going on here today with the Setworks. Aside from that, you'll also see me using the debarker. And so there's two primary controls for that. So I can turn the debarker on. I can also make it go in and out. So when I get things started, I typically move it in towards the log. Once it's in, I turn it on, and that stays on to allow the blade to spin. And that'll be what I use for my first cut. Now with my sawmill, I only will encounter the bark on the first cut based on where the log stops are, being on this side of the mill. And so I'll use that debarker only once for each log. Some people will call it a mud saw as well. You can see it right here. That's that blade that'll be turning. Now here's the logs we're sawing. Different logs will be different dimensions. Smaller ones will make, 2x4s out of 4x4s. Bigger ones will break into a 2x6, something thereabouts. Well, as they say, you find something you like doing, you do it, and you never work a day in your life. I could certainly put a sign up for that here at the sawmill. I don't find myself really working out here just because I enjoy doing it so much. Now, there are some times when there's hiccups, setbacks, mechanical, weather, bugs, all the rest of it, but I still really enjoy getting out here and making sawdust. Now, some people will get real sticky on the size of logs or the quality of the logs or the type of log. Not me, though. I'll saw anything. I just enjoy doing it. Now, from time to time, I'm forced to saw a particular log because I need it for someone else or myself or whatever the case may be. But most of the time, I don't mind sawing anything. And as you can tell, this goes so fast that even small logs will yield a 2x4 or 4x4 in just a minute or two. Usually what the holdup is me. I've only had this fully hydraulic sawmill for a few months, and this is coming from someone who's had a manual sawmill for years. I had an awful lot to learn, and I'm still learning. But the controls are starting to feel second nature. The Setworks is coming in and really lending a hand here, taking out a lot of the mathematical errors that can happen. And with those tools, with the ability to move the log whenever I decide, it's making things go real quick. Now, we still have some logs yet to get through, but I think at this point I'm going to take a little bit of a water break. I put the sludge away on hot days, and then I'll come back out and I'll get back to it. I probably have piles like this, but about 10 times higher, 5 times wider, and probably about 100-fold out there. I'll get to those eventually, but as they say, one step at a time, one challenge at a time, one log at a time. If you like this video, don't forget to give it the old like-a-roo. Make sure you subscribe. If you have any questions about my Clarke Model 350-38 here, be sure to put it down below. Hopefully I see you next time.